Good morning and welcome back to Tea Time in the Life of an LDA. I am Alberto Ortega with Bakersfield, California, Legal Success, and my co-host is Mandy Flores from Sacramento, California, with Docs We Prep. Today we have something so exciting for you. We have a special guest. We have Chris Stephan with Riverside, California, with Law Without Lawyers. Please give a warm welcome as we hear what he has to say. Thank you, Chris, for joining us. It's such an honor to hear from you and get to talk to you a little about what it is that Law Without Lawyers is. So, can you give us a little bit of who you are, what your little background is, and what exactly is Law Without Lawyers?
Thank you, Berta and Mandy for having me. I appreciate being able to come on here and do this. Um, as you mentioned, the company is called Law Without Lawyers, but I actually am a lawyer. You and I have known each other, I'm going to guess about a decade now, through CALDA. As you know, for much of my career, I was offering limited scope services. And for those who don't know, you don't just have to hire an attorney to do your entirety of your case. You can hire somebody to do bits and pieces of it. There's a whole regulatory scheme surrounding that. And I built Law Without Lawyers to provide tools for people who aren't even going to be able to do that, because the regulatory reality of how limited scope works helps what I would call cost creep. And there's a certain level where people need a little bit of help. And I found that there was sort of a gap in what they needed. They either needed to sort of spend a little bit more than they should or would necessarily have to get a little bit of guidance. Or they were going to be left with very little guidance. And while they can go to LDAs like you guys, you prepare things in their specific direction. And what Law Without Lawyers is really about is providing some education on how to do that specific direction. So that's kind of the mission of Law Without Lawyers, is to kind of fill that gap. So yeah, I started Law Without Lawyers, even though I am a lawyer. Don't know if that answers your question or not, but that's the
I think it
best I
was a
got.
little bit more.
Yeah.
And Chris, real quick, I have a question just for the people that could be watching us today. You mentioned a limited scope. Could you just briefly explain what a limited scope is?
Yeah, so I'm going to use an example of family law because that's kind of the idea of where limited scope came from, or one of the main areas it was used. So when you are hiring an attorney, the traditional model is you go to an attorney that, say you're in a child custody case, divorce case, and you go and you pay that attorney a retainer, and then they do everything on the case and bill off that retainer. Limited scope is where you are limiting what the tasks of the attorney are within the case. So you are technically self-represented except for certain aspects. So the most common one in my experience would be somebody is self-represented in, say, a divorce, but they have an important hearing coming up and they would hire me for that day. So I would be hired in limited scope for that one hearing. And the way I would explain it to people is there's paperwork that allows me to appear and paperwork that would take me out and put them back in an unambiguous role of self-represented. And so I'd say, think of it like wrestling. You're tapping me in and then you're tapping me out, even though you're still kind of in the ring with me. So I
Okay.
probably over-explained there, but hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Chris, what is or who is Law Without Lawyers actually built for? And who is it not for?
Okay, so there's a couple of areas of law, and I, as you know, being offering limited scope services has taken me different places. While I mentioned that there's a lot in family law, there's actually a lot of areas where somebody likes you because you help them with a hearing on a child custody case, and then they're getting evicted. They tend to want to be with the person they sort of trust. So it drug me to different areas of law that I didn't anticipate. And pretty much across the board, there is a gap in self-help services. So you have the full representation. You do have limited scope offerings, and a lot of attorneys don't offer it. Um, you have LDAs, but you have a bit of a gap with LDAs in terms of the education aspect. So I'm not exactly sure how, and maybe you guys can answer this question better than I can, how it's done now. But way back when I started getting to know LDAs, people would walk into an LDA office, the LDA would have a questionnaire, and people would periodically stop and say, wait, I don't know how to answer this question. And they'd have like the NOLO press book or a CALDIC guide and say, well, we need you to read this. Now, what was being provided, I would argue, it would be too little and too much at the same time. So you would have a NOLO press book about divorce, and it would be this giant thing, and they would have to sort of pinpoint, okay, I'm reading just one page. Or you'd have a CALDIC guide that was really more geared towards, all right, you need to know what you want when you walk into an LDA's office. Law Without Lawyers is sort of for the middle ground of that. Somebody knows, okay, I need to respond to a credit card lawsuit. I need to respond to an RFO over spouse support, child custody, what you name it. And they want to go further than just a couple of paragraphs on how do I analyze what I should do. And I guess the modern corollary would be going to ChatGPT and asking, hey, what are my options here? And setting aside from the fact that it may include options that are inaccurate for where you are, you're probably going to be getting just a couple of paragraphs. I wanted to provide something a little bit more comprehensive and also provide some tools to use, because there's a lot of stuff that LDAs don't do either because of the way LDAs are regulated. So it's basically that gap in between people who are not sure what to do. They know they don't need a full service attorney, but they also know that their options are limited. So I wanted to address that. And that's who Law Without Lawyers is for. I can go into this more specific stats if you want.
We can probably do that later, but we've got a few questions that we want to get through and give our audience what they came here to listen for.
Mm-hmm.
So, Chris, I have a quick question. What is the mission behind the Law Without Lawyers about?
So I think it's probably a good time for me to actually share those stats. Roughly 80% of the people in California family courts are self-represented. Roughly 90% of tenants are self-represented in eviction cases. Roughly 90+% of people who are sued by a debt collector are self-represented. While there is an LDA market that can help some of that market with, self-help, self-help plus, I guess would be the way of putting it. But the mission is really to address the portion of the market that LDAs aren't able to help. And Mandy, you may not know this, but Berta has known me well enough to know that I have this opinion that the LDA market is vastly underserved. And despite the best efforts of CALDA, I don't know that it's ever really going to get there to actually feel the need. And so, Law Without Lawyers is providing courses, do-it-yourself courses, and some automation tools to sort of fill that gap. So that's the mission, is to provide, somebody goes on, they have a discrete legal problem, they know they don't need a lawyer, but they're not quite sure what they need. And so they can go on and jump on a course that they can hopefully knock out in an evening, use an automation tool, answer a dozen to maybe a couple dozen questions and have the tool spit out the proper forms, and then they'll know what to do with them. So that's sort of the mission, is sort of especially for a lot of the people that I found, and you guys could probably attest to this, will have a deadline in like a day or two, and then they're scrambling around at the last second. I really wanted to address that without having to continue to scramble myself, because that's sort of the role you're in. I don't know if I'm answering any of these questions.
So in a nutshell, it basically provides education to those who are representing themselves throughout the court system.
Yes, correct.
Perfect.
Thank you.
So in the sense, my next question, which I think you just answered, was perfect, was how does Law Without Lawyers actually work for someone who uses it? It actually educates them in a way that us LDAs cannot educate them. So
Correct.
it's factual printed information from an attorney where it can help them almost like a DIY, whatever, do it
Do it
yourself kind of
yourself.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay, perfect.
definitely. One of the other things too is that it's allowing them to do that without actually having to interact with a professional that they're going to have to pay substantial time to have that interaction.
Mhm.
One of the things that I've tried over and over again in my career were limited scope consults. And you can do a few here and there, but so often it just leads to more frustration for all sides. So the customers come in and they're not quite sure what to do, and the costs are high, but running a law office is also expensive to do. So you kind of had those two things colliding, and I wanted to try to find a solution that wasn't just another NOLO press, because that already exists. If somebody really wants to sit down and read 250 pages on how California divorce works, they can. That's out there. But most people want to be more, okay, I need to go, I have this mission. So what do I do with this? And that's a different package. And of course, LDAs can do things that's people's specific direction, but they have to have that specific direction to do it.
And I
Yeah.
have a question. What courses and resources does Law Without Lawyers currently offer at this time?
So we have 3 courses right now. We have a do-it-yourself debt defense course on debt collection lawsuits in California. And what comes with that is somebody would fill out about a dozen questions on a questionnaire, and there's an automation tool that spits out an answer, spits out propounded discovery, some settlement communications if that's the way they want to go, and boilerplate responses to discovery. We can't know what the creditor is actually going to ask every time because they all go in different order, but there's a sort of a general response so that somebody doesn't get caught off guard. And then the course gives them materials to understand what to do with those documents, whether they should be using them at all, what to avoid in settlement, what to avoid when they're litigating, that sort of thing. We also have a last second debt collection hearing course, which is really designed for somebody who has not done much of anything other than answer. And then they're showing up to court the next day and they are panicking, like, what the hell do I do? So, and that was just basically sort of created after we got started. And then I have a general, like, how to go to court without an attorney, because there's a lot of people who just don't know sort of the basics and how to properly prepare. And so it gives some level of structure. We've got a few more coming out. But those are the 3 that are live as of this moment.
Okay, that's great information. Thank you.
Yeah. So we actually met through CalDA, me and you, eons ago, right? Can you talk about how you found your way into CalDA, being the fact that you're an attorney? How did you get involved with CalDA and become part of that community?
So I believe it was 2014, and I had been working for a debt settlement law firm up through 2013, and that had always been kind of a part of what I was doing. The way they explained it wasn't pro bono, it was low bono. So everyone was paying a little bit of money, and then it was sort of like the HMO model, like you're only going to need so much lawyer any given time. That was where I kind of got my start in the practice of law. And then in 2013, there's a natural attrition to it. Things kind of got better in the country from where they had been when it started in 2009. And so in 2013, that ended. And what I found was just the normal practice of law was not only chaotic, there was most cases, especially civil cases, when I was doing a lot of those, can take forever. And they just seem to go on and on and on.
Yeah.
And most of it felt, for lack of a term, it felt hollow. It was basically how civil litigation is how rich people fight. So they don't necessarily punch each other; they sue each other. And so there was a lot of that going on, and I kind of felt like, okay, this is sort of pointless. And also there was still demand. I was still getting the occasional call, hey, can you go to my eviction next week? Hey, can you go to my hearing? And I said, let me try to make a business out of this. And I walked into an LDA's office that had the calendar flyers, and I did not realize that was a thing. A month later, I'm at a calendar meeting, and a couple months after that, I'm speaking at calendar events. And I think probably within a year or so, we met,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, we met in Napa when you were doing the boot camp up there.
Yeah, so I think that was probably 2016,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. So, way back when. Um, and one of the things there was still plenty of sort of how did people come here like through the LDA process. There was still plenty of rich people who were suing each other that were using LDAs to do some of the paperwork, but there was also a lot different things, and so it didn't feel as hollow for one thing. There was sort of things that I, not for lack of a better term, had some kind of meaning, like you were actually helping people. There was also, it was exciting because people were, when they like you, they come to your office for things that maybe they shouldn't. And account members have to say, no, I don't want to do that, or no, I can't do that.
Yeah.
And some of those things would find their way to me. And then the other thing is that there were so many ancillary businesses that LDAs were doing that was so different. And so you'd see different hats. And I started with CALDA and LDAs, and then I got to seek out credit repair people and surplus recovery people, foreclosure consultants. And there's this whole sub niche of what I call non-attorney legal professionals. And they are heavily regulated. A lot of attorneys hate them as a general rule, but a lot of them are doing good work. Not all, but a lot of them are. And so that's kind of how it just sort of fit. The other thing, and this is not to be, negative to my profession, practicing law has a tendency of driving people crazy. And so a lot of the attorneys I knew that were my counterparts, for lack of a better term, I would say they were sort of stuck. And, it's one thing when, I was fresh out of law school, almost 30 years old, and, you have a long day of work and everybody wants to go have a drink. When people are in their 40s and 50s and that's all they ever want to do when they're doing it at their office, it's just a different kind of negative environment. I did not get that sense with Calda members. And so I kind of made a lot of friends in the Calda space, simply because, we're working in the same place, and there's a lot of good people, and there isn't that as much of that toxicity. There's still some, but not as much. So it was kind of a natural pairing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think when, like you said, there is some toxics, but you can wean that out. There is 90% of the good.
Yeah.
There's a few toxic in our profession.
Yeah.
However, I think also being in CALDA, you get to be around a lot of people that know, they're constantly educated. They're constantly following the rules because they're watched.
Mm-hmm.
So you didn't have that nitpicking or that, cat fights between being toxicity.
No, and the other thing is that CALDA members and LDAs and really non-attorney professionals in general don't hide the toxicity as well as attorneys do. Attorneys are really good at that on the surface. So it's a lot easier. You're absolutely right. It's a lot easier to screen that out, outside of the actual lawyer environment. So it's a good point. Definitely a good point.
Okay. That's some great information.
Okay. So what else is coming soon that you're building towards?
Okay, so I've been working on a do-it-yourself debt settlement course. As I mentioned earlier, I worked for a debt settlement law firm at the beginning of my career. I know that post-pandemic, that is a thing again, and there's a lot of, debt settlement companies out there. And there's a lot of information people don't understand about how that works. And really, it is your own money that is settling these things. And it is the method of trying to avoid bankruptcy. And so that's sort of, one of the places that I keep rewriting the thing because this changes. And, I want to make sure I do it right. But that's something that's nearly finished. The other is regarding student loans, and those rules have been moving targets too. So in 2022, the Department of Justice and Department of Education came up with new guidelines on how they were going to handle adversary claims. And let me define for the viewers what that is there's a common misconception that you can't do anything about federal student loans in bankruptcy. Technically, there's been a process on the books for a long time where you file what's called an adversary claim, which is a case within the case where you are basically suing the Department of Education saying these loans should be discharged. Now, typically they had low success rates, but in 2022, they changed the process by how the federal departments that respond to these things process them. And so instead of having sort of a chaotic discovery process, they created an attestation form. So I've been working for a while to try to put together a course on how to do that because lawyers absolutely do not want to do that for customers because it's so much work. I've talked to quite a few attorneys that do adversary claims and I would ask, so what's your advice about doing them? And the advice is don't do them because it's so much work. But the nature of student loans in bankruptcy is that the folks that have student loans have some level of education, can follow the steps, but it's been sort of whack-a-mole at what is the new protocol. And so this has been written and rewritten, and but that's coming. So those are the two things sort of on the immediate horizon. And then after that, I'm planning on just sort of seeing what does the customer base, what are they looking for?
I have an answer for that.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
I get a lot of calls for tenant and landlord issues. There's a big pool of people that need help with that, and there's not a lot of services for that from what I've been hearing.
So let me tell you part of my challenge with that. Each county in California likes to make its own damn rules and forms when it comes to some of this stuff. And the problem that you'd have from a structural problem in terms of creating automation tools, which will be necessary to go along with these courses, is that you need scale for it to work. So that is something I've sort of had in the back of my mind. That's something I've had in the back of my mind, but I haven't quite gotten there yet. But if both of you are telling me that's what the market's looking for,
you know that I kind of walked away from evictions. If somebody could bring information to me more, because as an LDA, I can't tell them, right?
Yeah.
That's why I thought about becoming a UDA. But the landlord tenant is just a place where landlords do not get any kind of help.
Yeah.
There's so many of these, like, all these different nonprofit organizations helping the tenant side, but the landlord, there is literally no direction for them at all.
Yeah, and there's a lot of predators in the space that are just charging like crazy. And so it's sort of, you want to evict somebody, well, you're going to need to drop 15, 20 grand on the attorney fees, and then you might have to pay the tenants to leave. And so it's pre-pandemic, I had already kind of pulled my metaphorical hair. Well, I still didn't have there, but I was so frustrated with landlords because I felt like they were like the kids in the backseat of the car on a road trip. Are we there yet? Are we there? Are we done yet? Are we done yet? And then the pandemic hit, and I suddenly felt bad for a lot of the mom and pops. Not the institutions; they're going to manage, but the mom and pop that owns one or two units and is horrendously screwed over and losing their retirement because of a tenant not paying and not leaving.
Right.
So I understand there's a definite need. The problem really comes down to it doesn't really scale through the state.
Right.
And so that's been the challenge. But I'm making a note of this, that both of you are doing the hard sell.
I think there would be a need. I think that course would sell quite a bit because landlords are just lost. They're lost. It's just, the state of California is just, landlords are lost at this point. And most of them, mom and pop people, cannot afford to go get an attorney.
Yeah.
They just are stuck with these people in their house for sometimes years, and they can't get them out because they don't know what to do. Or in the sense, I had one that is an estate. They have to have an attorney to get these people out.
And see, and then you get into the whole thing of, okay, then that attorney is going to need to also represent the estate. So then you have a skills gap. And then even if, because I think I know which one you're talking about, even if
Yeah,
you
you do.
understand how probate and eviction work, that's not a great place to be. That sounds like sort of a miserable place to be for an attorney for your clients, because you have this estate, they're trying to get people out, but you need to process both.
So I'm guessing
And
you don't want me to send you that case, right?
no, I'm actually, listen,
I
I'm
know.
sort
I'm
of
just
working
kidding.
towards trying to make this my primary. And the reason being is that um, I can only help so many people. I can only do so much, and spread different area, different directions
Directions.
a little bit too much. Sooner or later, I'm going to go crazy. It hasn't happened yet, but
Mhm.
at least I hope
Yeah.
not.
Well, thank you so
So,
much for answering that question. I'm going to have to go, but it's
okay.
been such a pleasure having you, Chris, on our tea time. Thank you, Alberta, for your time as well. Thank you for everybody who's listening. Again, I am Mandy Flores. I am with DocSuite Prep in Sacramento. I am a registered and bonded legal document preparer. I type and file documents at your direction. My website is docsuiteprep.com. Mandy Flores, thank you guys again. Okay. And we
All
will
right.
do this again soon.
Yes. Bye, Mandy. We'll
Bye.
talk
Bye.
soon.
Hey, Mandy, it was nice nice sharing this time with you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for coming here as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye bye.
Okay, Chris. So let's
We are going to
go.
run out of time in 5 minutes because I the freebie. What I could do is get off and
Okay.
do a new one. You want to do that?
Yeah, we could do that, and then we can finish the rest of the questions. So,
Yeah.
um, we'll have to
You
cut
want to
that part.
stop now because she just got off, and you want to do it that way?
Yeah, we'll cut it there,
Okay.
and
And I'm
then
going to
we'll
stop the
do
record.
another for now. Right now, though. What is it? Okay.
Okay.
So we're gonna go ahead. Yes, we're gonna go ahead and wrap. We know that Mandy left us already. We're gonna wrap this up. We want to thank you, Chris, for join us. This information has been very, very helpful, and we really want you to come back for a part two. Let's dive deeper in that, and
Yes.
give the audience what they're asking for, the information that is value out there. So again, we want to say thank you, everybody, for tuning in and following us. Follow us on all our social medias. I'm Alberta Ortega with Legal Success. And Chris, go ahead and give me your information.
Well, first of all, Berta, thank you very much for having me on here again. I really, really enjoyed my time talking to you and Mandy. And yeah, it went by really quickly. And yeah, we'll cover some more stuff on another time. In the meantime, I'm Chris Stephan. I am an attorney, but I'm also running Law Without Lawyers. You can find us at www.law-without-lawyers.com. And I have that in the chat. And yeah, thank you again. And I look forward to coming back.
Perfect. We'll talk soon.
Thank
Bye.
you.